Welcome to another episode in our series, Sitting with God on the Brink of Eternity. The lesson tonight that I'll be sharing about is entitled Our Dual Existence. There are two of me right now. You only see one of me, but there are two of me, rest assured. I heard a sermon title many years ago that said, God, please help the two of us. And that sermon was about the good side of us and the bad side of us, our sinful nature and our spiritual nature. I'm not talking about that tonight, but I thought it was a good title because there are two of us. I'm talking about our outward part that you see, the physical part, and then the inner part or the spiritual part. And I want to talk about that because we are two people in one, and the more we understand that, the better we are going to do in the spiritual realm. My favorite passage probably in the Bible is 2 Corinthians 4, verses 16 through 18. Verse 16 says this, "Therefore we do not lose heart. Though outwardly we are wasting away, yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day." Now, the outward part's wasting away. We can't do anything about that. I recently turned 80 years old. I don't know how it happened. It just happened. And so that's the part that is wasting away. The inward part, though, is the part made in the image of God. And that one, Paul said, is renewed day by day, but that's up to us. We have to make sure that happens to keep our spiritual side growing and changing as the outer part is aging. The truth is, the inner part doesn't age. I tell people that I feel like I'm 35 years old, and I do. I don't feel any differently than I did when I was 35. I look differently, my body feels differently, but the inside of me is made in the image of God. It doesn't age. It doesn't even sleep. It doesn't need sleep. It's created for eternity. So when you dream at night, that's the inside part of you, made in God's image, that doesn't need any sleep, so it dreams. That's another whole interesting story. But at any rate, when I reached the age of 80, rather, see, I still think I'm 50. But when I reached the age of 80, I thought about the Psalm 90, and it says that we live to be 70, and by reason of strength, maybe 80, and then we fly away. And so even though I feel 35, I don't look that, and I'm really not that. And so Psalm 139 says that all the days ordained for us were there before one of them came to be. And so God knows the time of our birth, the time of our death, and everything in between. But that 80 mark is a serious age. And I thought about that as I celebrated my birthday. So the inner part and the outer part, they're together right now, but they don't have to be. In fact, death is simply the departure of the inner side out of the body. That's what it is defined as biblically. Here are a few verses to help us with that. It says in James 2:26, "As the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead." So when the spirit leaves the body, we call that death, but the only thing that's died is the outer part. Paul said this in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, "For we know that if the earthly tent we live in," referring to the body, "is destroyed, we have a building from God, an eternal house in heaven, not built with human hands." And then Peter continues with a tent analogy, which is a very good one because tents are temporary dwelling places, right? They're not permanent. They're not designed to be that. But anyway, Peter says this in 2 Peter 1, verses 13 and 14, "I think that it is right to refresh your memory as long as I live in the tent of this body, because I know that I will soon put it aside, as our Lord Jesus Christ has made clear to me." And so a tent analogy works quite well in thinking about our inner and outer part. The thing that gave me this insight was my experience in the hospital, of course, like all the other insights that I've been sharing. But I learned being in the hospital that my inner part is a lot stronger and more capable than I would have imagined. My outer part was about done. My daughter by marriage, a nurse, Joy, Joy said that there were days I didn't say a thing. I mean, I was just so out of it, and I looked out of it. And yet, when someone came and talked with me, I was able to get the inner part awake and responding and actually make sense. I talked to doctors every day. And so when they would come in, somehow my inner part came to life and was able to escape what the body was doing. And I was able to think and talk and make sense and all of that. The hospital I was in was a teaching hospital. And so that means there were a lot of medical students running around, and a part of their curriculum was to come in and interview me. And so as they came in and interviewed me, I had to somehow have my inner part respond to them. I had to be able to think, I had to be able to talk, I had to be able to reason. And so I was able to do that. I found out that my inner being, the inside part, the real part that's right now thinking and talking, the part made in God's image, it was able to come outside of the state that I was in and function rather independently of my physical body. That was very strange. It wasn't as dependent on the body as I would have expected. So I thought that was not only a little shocking, but I thought that was a pretty impressive thing as they asked me questions and I was able to talk. Now, a part of the thing that made it so hard is I did have a tube down my nose running to my stomach, and it hurt to talk. It hurt all the time, that nose tube, because it's not a nice little flexible plastic thing. It's hard plastic and flexible barely, but at any rate, it was hard to talk. But my mind, the real part of me, was working, and so I was able to talk and to make sense with doctors, with people taking care of me, and with those medical students that seemed to turn up at just the wrong times. And yet, my inner part was able to come out and talk. So I think it's very important that we understand that we are two people in one. Because when death comes, you don't cease to exist. And I say of people who have died that their body is dead, that part's gone, but the real them is more alive than it has ever been. And so that brings comfort to me. For my friends that die as Christians, it brings me great comfort to know that they're just as alive today as they ever have been. In fact, more alive, because they have escaped something that is holding them captive, and that is the body itself. I love the way that Paul put it in 2 Corinthians 4. He said in verse 18, as he ends the chapter, "So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." So to me, the idea of having a dual existence, the inside and the outside, the spiritual part that doesn't age or die, understanding that, the takeaway for me is we need to make sure we're focused, as Paul said we should be, not on the seen things, because they're all temporary. I've had people show me some very beautiful buildings and ask me what I thought of it. And there are times I just smile and I say, well, I think it's all going to burn up. It's going to cease to exist at some point because it is temporary. It is physical in nature. But the takeaway for me is I need to make sure that I am focusing on what is unseen. And that includes my unseen part. I need to make sure that it's changing and growing all the days of my life. One of the concerns I have for people, and I've had it for myself, by the way, because of what I have observed, but one of my main concerns is I have watched people as they age, and I have seen many people age badly, not simply physically. I'm talking about spiritually. I read about that in the Bible. There were leaders in the Bible, kings, for example, that did great when they were young, and the older they got, the burdens of life weighed down on them. They did not keep renewing their spirit within them, and they ended up in a train wreck. And I've seen a lot of people do that. I've watched them. And I've said to myself, the only way I know to avoid that is to do what Paul said, and that is to focus on the unseen and to make sure that my inside part, my real part, is being renewed day by day. And so every day I pray a lot. I read the Bible. I'm reading the Bible through a lot these days. There's a story about an old man in a nursing home, and he read his Bible all day, every day. And someone finally asked him, "Why in the world are you doing that?" And he replied, "I am cramming for the final." I don't look at it that way exactly. But there is something about being older and knowing that your life is going to end sooner than later that makes you want to make sure that you are reading the Bible, that you are communing with God, that you are nourishing and feeding and developing the inside part of you, because that is the part that's going to keep you going and keep you strong. I do not want to be like a lot of older people. As they age, the burdens of life catch up with them. They are not still growing spiritually. And when enough challenges come their way, finally it beats them down to the point that they get negative, they get cynical, they give up on life, they give up on themselves, and worst of all, they give up on God. And that does not happen if you do what Paul said. So I remember being in a classroom, hearing this part of 2 Corinthians chapter 4 taught, and one of my first sermons was entitled, "Seeing the Unseen." And so many times I have taught on that passage. It is my favorite passage. It is what I am dedicating my life to doing and being. I am trying to make my inside grow and be healthy and be young at heart, and be young at heart with God, especially because the things that are seen are temporary and the things that are not seen are eternal. And that includes the real me that you are hearing right now, although not seeing. Okay, as is our custom, we have a guest from my church group, Kylie Houston. And so she's going to have some questions to ask. But Kylie is one of our young married couples. She's been married for a year or so, and she is expecting child number one. And so that's all exciting, but I appreciate very much you being with us today.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'm sure you have good questions, and I'll do my best.
Sounds good. All right. So, this idea of a dual existence, um, just to clarify, the dual existence, one is spiritual, one is earthly. Can you explain that a little bit more?
Okay. Well, the part that you see is the earthly part. That's the physical part.
Yeah.
And as I mentioned in the presentation from James and Peter and Paul, you have the inner part of us, and the outer part is called a tent sometimes,
Yeah.
temporary dwelling. But the physical part of us is the part that we live in, but there is a we inside of what you see. And the me part inside is the real part. That's the part made in the image of God.
Yeah.
And that's the part that will survive the body. So when my death occurs, people will look at me and say he's dead, and they'll be accurate talking about the physical part, but the spiritual part will be gone.
Right. It's very interesting to think about. I guess one of my questions to start off is, how are spiritual selves and our earthly selves connected, and how do they work together? How do they coincide, and at what points, or are there points, are they separate, or do you think about them separately or function in a way that they are separate, or is it mainly just having them work together? Does that make sense?
Yeah, how they're connected is a good question. I don't know. God did all of that. He created us and breathed into us a breath of life, gave us His Spirit, made us in His image. So I don't think that we consciously think much about being a two-part being.
Yeah.
It all works together, but the inside part has to be somewhere, and that's where God put it. The real us is inside a body, but a functional body that's built for this earth, and this earth is a preparation ground for eternity. And so for me to carry out the things that God wants me to carry out, the body is what does it.
Right.
But my mind, my soul, the inner part, directs the outside of me about what it should be doing. And so it works in concert in that way. I did have the experience in the hospital of being out of it almost entirely physically, and yet
Right.
somehow was able to get out of that and actually make sense. And the inside part of me was able to function with the outside part being in a state of much disarray,
Right.
which to me just gave evidence that yes, we are a soul and a body.
Yeah. You said that we don't think much about them being separate. Do you feel like there would be any reason to, I guess, kind of focus on one versus the other, or any like point just in life in general? Being young, being middle-aged, being older, like, is there any importance in thinking about them separately?
Well, for sure, when you think about eternity and you think about death and you're around death.
Yeah.
So when I die, I want people to, I know they'll be sad. Some might be some happy.
I don't know about that
you
one.
know,
I hope not.
everyone has some enemies. But
Yeah.
at any rate, people will be sad, but thinking about the fact that I'm in another place and
Yeah.
what they see,
Yeah.
the dead part is not the real me now.
Yeah.
It is a part of the real me now.
Right.
That's how you know me. We know each other.
Right.
But the inner part is the part that continues to live, and focusing on that helps. Uh, I think the focus part is I have to focus on the spiritual side of it, because if I have that in the right place, the
Right.
outside is gonna go the right direction. I can't let my quote animal instincts, the natural instincts, carry the day.
Right.
I've got to have my insides with the right priorities, making sure that my outside does the right thing.
Yeah.
So uh, the inside is the control mechanism for the outside.
Right. Focusing on what is ahead,
Right.
kind of thing. Yeah. Um, I guess another question I have, something that you touched on a little bit, is feeding that spiritual self,
Mhm.
and the importance of feeding that spiritual self. What are some of the ways that you have found have been the most effective in feeding and nurturing your spiritual self?
Uh, Great question. It's usually fairly basic answer. Talking to God, listening to God through reading the Word, and associating with people that are going to help me do that are
Yeah.
going to teach me things, that are going to give me insights. Book reading's been huge for me.
Yeah.
I love reading. I feel badly for the younger generation that doesn't like to read. I read about one fairly famous guy. He said he'd rather eat, Brussels sprouts than read.
Brussels sprouts are good.
I actually like Brussels
Me
sprouts
too.
if they're cooked
Yeah.
well.
Seasoned well.
Yeah, seasoned well, right. But the younger generation doesn't like to read, but that's why we are doing a podcast,
Yeah.
because they can watch that. People like to watch videos or movies or whatever else. But reading has been huge to me.
Yeah.
I've read books that have changed my life.
Yeah.
And so, but being around spiritual people and avoiding things I know that are going to hurt me and drag me down.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes people want to walk as close to the line as they can between the world and the spiritual side. And to me, I want to stay away from that side because I have gotten pulled into something, some things before that I didn't think I'd get pulled into. But
Right.
if I had been more careful about not getting too close to the line, I wouldn't have gotten in the problem. So it's a package deal, but I would say that the spiritual nourishment, reading the Bible. I read the Bible a lot. I try to be around spiritual people, try to get spiritual insights, and then prayer for me is big because
Yeah.
I'm an emotionally based person. I've got some emotional damage from my childhood. I was raised in a pretty dysfunctional setting with a harsh father and all of that. He worked all that out. We became great friends later, but I have some things emotionally that I wish were different. And
Yeah.
so I can have struggles and all of that. So for me, prayer has been everything. I mean, once I started doing prayer walks, I was somewhere under 40, and I hadn't prayed much before then. Even though I was preaching, I wasn't praying a lot.
Yeah.
And when I started having prayer walks and just pouring my heart out to God, that helped a ton to unload.
Yeah.
And he says to do it. Cast all your anxiety on him, for he cares for you, Peter said. And then now I do a lot of journaling. Since I'm a writer, it just comes out. All the thoughts and stuff inside me come out so much in writing that I journal now more than anything.
Yeah.
My prayers are journaling.
Yeah.
And so my prayers from one day to the next are very, very different.
Yeah.
Because I wake up a different me.
Right.
And I wish I were more emotionally the same from day to day, but I'm not. And my wife's managed to put up with me for a lot of years. And so,
Amen.
anyway, I think the expression of things to God and to people, of what's really going on inside of us, the vulnerability, the generation now calls it authenticity.
Yeah.
That's what we want to see in each other. I want to know you're the real you.
Right.
Don't try to fool me.
Yeah.
Tell me who you really are, and then we'll be close.
Right.
And that's what everyone feels about the other person. And so I would just say the vulnerability is a huge part of that as well.
Yeah. How do you feel like you've dealt with just the ebbs and flows of feeling close to God versus having just times where you feel really distant, and fighting and being resilient and coming back? And how have you managed to stay faithful for so long, I guess, is the more general question.
It's a great question. I think I recognize that there are times when I feel distant from God. There are times I feel very close to God. There are times I get angry with God.
Yeah.
And the Psalms help me because the psalmists were honest about where they were.
Yeah.
And every psalm, many psalms, started off with people in bad places. And by the end of the psalm, they got to a good place.
Yeah.
Psalm 88 is the one exception. The last thing that the psalmist said was, "Darkness is my closest friend." And I've had prayers like that where I ended up and said, "Lord, I'm in a bad place and I know it." But I think the vulnerability thing is huge there too. I have started off with prayer walks back when I did a lot of walking in prayer, and I still probably journal the same way. But I've started prayer walks off by saying, God, you already know this since you know everything that I'm thinking and feeling, but this is about the last thing I'd rather be doing right now
Yeah.
is praying.
Yeah.
But I know I need it, and I'm just asking you to help me to get to a better place because I'm going to do it.
Right.
It may be a feeble effort, but I'll do what I can. And please let the Holy Spirit help me out here
Yeah.
so I get to a better place. And God normally always answers that, and I get to a better place.
Yeah.
But I think God understands that we're human. He
Yeah.
made us. He knows that we're going to have ebbs and flows and ups and downs. And I think that we've got to recognize that and do the best we can on any given day and trust that the next day can be better and probably will be.
Yeah.
But sometimes we can be too hard on ourselves. Some of us are not hard enough. Some of us are too hard. We got to figure out that balance for us and kind of the way we're made.
Right.
But marriage, I mean, you're a young married. You know that your mate has ups and downs. You have ups and downs, but you love each other. And so you put up with it and a better day comes.
Yeah. Absolutely. I feel like with being young, there's obviously just this certain mindset that comes with being young. I feel like it's really hard to look forward and to have that long-term mindset. Um, because you get to a certain age and you start, all right, well, I should have started doing X, Y, and Z a long time ago.
Right.
I should have started doing this, and this. And just kind of regretting or wishing that you made different decisions or um, what would be some advice that you would give young people to help them to focus on their spiritual selves and not so much on their earthly selves? Because it's so easy when you're young, you feel like you have all of the time in the world.
Right.
You know, you feel like you have all the health, you have all of the friends, all of your family, you know, all of the different things. What do you think is important to be able to really focus on that spiritual side and feed that spiritual side for a long-term relationship with God to be able to carry that to the end?
Well, I think it kind of comes in on the discipline side of it. I know that certain things are going to help me. I know that intellectually. Whether I want to do it emotionally or not, I know it's the right thing to do, whether it's physical health or spiritual health. And so I have to determine that I am going to do certain things.
Mm.
And so if it's Bible reading or talking to people and vulnerability and all of that, I've got to decide to do that and get some kind of discipline going. And then when I blow it, I've got to realize, okay, God had a plan for my life, plan A, and I've already messed that one up. And so then he's got B. I don't know if I'm on quadruple Z or what right now, but we've got to be able to put the past behind us and move on.
Mm.
And so we've got to get that resiliency in there, but we also all have to come back to ground zero. What are the fundamentals that I know I need to be doing and do it and try to plan long range and then try to implement, and a sequence there, the things that you're doing. But planning ahead is huge. I mean, we're pretty good at that. A lot of
Yeah.
people are financially. They think in terms of, okay, a lot
Right.
of talk about retirement and planning ahead and all of that. But we have to do it spiritually. And that's a discipline.
Yeah.
And we pray about it. And we have someone that helps us be accountable to do that. I need people to ask me what I'm doing
Yeah.
spiritually and how I'm doing spiritually. I need that. We all need that. So some of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are good things. I feel like it's hard to see the future and to see what those things will bring long term
Right.
when you're in the now, you know,
Yeah.
when you're young, when you're just married and having
Yeah.
your first kid. And that's honestly something that's been on my heart a lot, just feeling the weight of like, all right, what am I doing right now
Mhm.
that's going to build my family, that's going to build my relationship with God, and help that to be something that
Mhm.
is going to be rock solid for a really long
Right.
time.
Well, I would say this, the fact that you're thinking about that is big because there are a lot of people out there not thinking about that at all. They're just
Yeah.
in the now. But at least you're thinking about that, which means you're far more likely to do something about it.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, you're at a much better stage than many people your age, but it is hard to not just live in the now and to
Yeah.
think ahead. And most all of us have a lot of regrets about not having done that earlier. But choices do a lot of things. Choices determine our future,
Yeah.
and choices determine the kind of person we're going to be when we get to our future.
Right.
Because every choice has something to do with you, who you are and become as a person.
Yeah.
So I would just say weigh choices very, very carefully and try hard to make really good ones and then adjust as quickly as you can when you're off course.
Yeah.
So I think that's the main thing. And I think this will be a good place to stop our question session here. But I
Sounds
really
good.
appreciate you being on here
Yeah.
with me and asking me some good questions. One thing old guys need is to keep their mind active, and so having people like you around to ask me questions makes me really think. So you've
Awesome.
done my brain, my synapses, or whatever those things are up there in the gray matter. You've done me some good,
Awesome.
and it's been great to have you and great to
Thank
get to
you.
know you better. I look forward to seeing that little baby of yours that comes in
February.
February. Okay, the cold weather.
Yep.
So we'll need some encouragement by then, and I'm sure looking at your baby will be a part of that. So
Thank
thanks so
you.
much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.